Good morning, Year 10. I've tried desperately hard to go live on YouTube, but unfortunately it won't let me do it without having verified my account 24 hours in advance. So I'm going to post this video now, and if you've got any questions, please post them in the comments, and then once I've done those, when I get back from school later on today, I'll put a video up with all the information on. Tomorrow we will be doing an assessment. The assessment comes in two parts. One will be a Google form based on the formula sheet to see which ones you know. The second part will be all about straight line graphs. So we'll start with what we normally do, which is to do our flashcard. So if you can get a piece of paper or a bit of cereal box or anything that will work for you, you might even have proper flashcards at home. And we're going to start with writing straight line graphs as our title on the front. Now it's important that it's straight line graphs because our next topic, or the next but one topic, is going to be quadratics. And on the back I'm going to suggest that you split your flashcard up into 4 distinct set spaces, because that's going to enable us to pick out the 4 key topics that we've covered. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the flashcard, then I'm going to post a quick revision thing or bit for each of those 4 topics. So let's start with drawing graphs. Now we should be very well practiced at this. And when we're drawing graphs, remember there's certain things that we've got to do each time. So step 1 is always our table of values. Step 2 is our consistent axes. Step 3 is plotting with a cross. Remember that you plot with a cross to enable the examiner to see it. If you plot with a dot, it makes it very difficult. And step 4 is join up with a ruler. So 4 things that we need to remember to do each time. I'm now going to do an example of that. So we're going to draw a graph. We're going to start with the graph of y equals 2x plus 3. So if you're following along with this, it would be worth trying to draw this graph yourself. If you're struggling for squared paper, you can go onto Google, type in squared paper and it will come up. So we're going to start with y equals 2x plus 3. So I'm going to start by drawing out my table of values. Now remember, that is where I have x and I have y. And I'm going to go from minus 2 up to 2. So minus 2, minus 1, 0, 1 and 2. And then I'm going to work out my y values. Remember, you don't need to do these in order. I'm going to start at 0 first. So I've got 2 times x, which is 2 times 0. That's 0. And add my 3 on. 2 times x, so 2 times 1 this time. 2 times 1 is 2. Add on my 3, I get 5. 2 times 2 is 4. Add 3, I get 7. And you can see that there is a pattern here, so I can just fill the rest in. I've got 1 and I've got minus 1. And if I wanted to check that, 2 times minus 2 is minus 4. Add my 3 on, gets me to minus 1. Now, remembering how this is going to work with the exams, I'm probably going to get 2 marks for completing my table of values. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw my axes. So I know that I'm going to need a graph that looks like a cross. So therefore I'm going to give myself plenty of space with my axes. Now, the paper I've got has got little squares. If you've got big squares, that's fine. Just think about adjusting your axes accordingly. So I know that all my gaps on an axis have to be the same. So my gaps on my x-axis down here all have to be the same, and the gaps on my y-axis at the top have to be the same. But x and y don't necessarily have to be. So I'm going to do every 4 squares here. So 4 squares, get a number. 4 squares, get a number. 4 squares, get a number. I know my graph, my table of values only goes up to 2. That extra number is not going to do any harm. I've got 0 in the middle, so 4 squares. I get a number. Do the same the other way. Keep going. Another 4 squares. Get a number. Another 4 squares. Get a number. Now for my y-axis, I've got to go up to 7, so I can't do 4 squares each time. So this time I'm going to do 2. So 2 squares, and there's a number. 2 squares, 2 squares, and I keep going like that, up to 7. Going down, exactly the same, making sure my axes are consistent. That's going to get me a mark somewhere along the line. Okay, and you can see that my gaps here are 2 squares every time, 4 squares that way. So I've got 1 mark for my consistent axes, and we should be well practiced at this. Now I'm going to start to put my points on. So I'm going across 0, up 3, and I mark with an X. Across 1, up 5, mark with an X. Across 2, up 7, mark with an X. Now this one is backwards 1 to -1, and up 1, mark with an X. And I've got backwards 2, and this time going down 1. Now if I've got this right, it should give me a nice straight line. Now remember, when we're drawing these straight lines on, we should go past the ends of the points to give me that perfect straight line graph, and actually you should go to the end of the graph. So I can see that I've plotted my points with a cross, and I can see that I've joined them with a ruler. Now to make this really precise for the examiner, I'd always make sure you've labelled the graph with y equals 2x plus 3. Apologies, the pencil I'm using is hopeless. Okay, so drawing a straight line graph, nice and simple, following the steps. Next thing that we're going to have to do, we'll just move that out the way for now, is we're going to find out the equation of a line. So if we're trying to find out the equation of a straight line, then there's a few steps that we have to follow. Step 1 is we find C. Now remember, that's the y-intercept. So I'm going to find that first. Step 2, I'm going to find M, which is our gradient, the steepness of the line, and from our formula sheet it's the change in y over the change in x. And then step 3, I remember that my formula is y equals mx plus c, so I can put my numbers in. Now I'm going to use the graph that we've just drawn to demonstrate that. So very quickly we can find out straight away that this value here, where it goes through the y-axis, is our c. So c equals, wherever it goes through, it's just 3. Then I need to work out my gradient. So my gradient is the change in y, remember the triangle means change, over change in x, which means I'm going to have to draw myself a right angled triangle. So I'm going to go straight onto my graph and draw myself a right angled triangle. Remember, I'm going to try and go so I'm staying next to squares. So I'm going to go across to here and I'm going to go up to that point there. I don't want to be in the middle of a square because that's going to make my life more difficult when I come to do the calculation. So here is my triangle. Now, all I'm looking for is my change in y. So I go across, I've gone from 3 up to 7. So my change in y is 4, we're not just counting squares. And my change in x, I've gone from 0 across to 2. So that means I've got a change in x of 2. So that's 4 over 2, which gives me an answer of 2. And so then I can combine all that together and get y equals mx plus c. And so I end up with y equals 2x plus 3, which is what we started off with on our very first graph. Okay, so hopefully you'll also remember that if the graph is pointing upwards, we're able to know that it's a positive gradient. And if the graph is pointing downwards, that gradient is going to be negative. Okay, third thing that we're looking to do today then is we're looking to make sure we can find out the equation of a graph from 2 points. So an equation from 2 points, and these are the only 4 topics that are going to be covered in the assessment tomorrow. So step 1, we're going to do it in a slightly different order this time. We're going to find M, which remember is our gradient, which is the change in y divided by the change in x. We'll do that with some coordinates in a second. Then what we're going to do is we're going to substitute in to find c. So we're going to substitute in to find c. Then we write it as y equals mx plus c for our final equation. So let's do our example here. I'm going to find the equation of the line that goes through. So the equation of the line that goes through 2, 1 and 0, 3. So first step, I'm going to work out my gradient. So step 1, I'm going to work out my gradient, which is my change in y divided by my change in x. Well, y has gone from 1 to 3, so it's changed by 2. X has gone from 2 to 0, so it's changed by 2, but it's gone down by 2. So therefore I'm going to need negative there. 2 divided by minus 2 gives us minus 1. So our gradient is minus 1. So our graph is heading down like this. Now if you're struggling with this one, you can always plot the graph with those 2 points and work it out from there. Step 2, I'm going to substitute in to find c. So I know I've got y equals mx plus c, but now I know what m is. So that means I've got y equals minus 1x plus c, and then I'm going to pick a coordinate. I'm going to pick 0, 3. So this means that x equals 0, y equals 3. So 3 equals minus 1 times 0 plus c. So 3 equals 0 plus c. So c must be 3. And then I can combine that together. I know my m, I know my c. So y equals minus 1x plus 3. I've found the equation of the line. Last but not least is our horizontal and vertical lines. Most of you looked at this yesterday and filled the Google form in. Don't worry if it missed the spaces out. I will put some scores onto those today. So horizontal and vertical lines. Now, when we're trying to work out if something's a horizontal or vertical line, remember that horizontal means like the horizon goes across. Vertical lines means goes straight up. Now, if it's a horizontal line like this, it must mean that it's a y equals something line. And a vertical line is an x equals something line. And what we do is we look where it goes through axes. So we look where it goes through the axes, because that's going to give us our answer. So going on to our sheet at the top here, I've got a horizontal line for number 1, so it must be y equals, and it goes through at 5. So y equals 5. Number 2, I've got a horizontal line again. It goes across, it goes through 2, so it's y equals 2. Same applies for negatives. Number 3, well, this is negative 1 this time, so it's y equals minus 1. Number 4, same again, it's a horizontal line, so it's a y equals, and it goes through minus 2. Number 5 goes this way, so it's a vertical line, so x equals, and where does it go through? It goes through 4. Number 6, x equals 2, and last but not least, number 7, x equals, and it goes through minus 4. So therefore we've got horizontal and vertical lines. Now, that means there's 4 things on our revision card today. Please get practicing with those. If you've got any questions about what I've said today, please post it. Please post an exact question and I'll do a video later answering those questions, ready for an assessment tomorrow. Have a good day, Year 10.